The next book that I read was Blindness by José Saramago, and I read this for Yamine's book club. I liked this book overall, but there were things I had issues with, and I kind of feel like now, after talking about it so much in the book club Boxer group, I'm a little exhausted about talking about it, but there is a scene in it that I found particularly unsettling, involving sexual violence, and I am not entirely sure how I feel about that being in there. Not to say that those kinds of topics can't ever be written about, but I do feel like they need to be very carefully written about, and the inclusion of them needs to feel warranted to me, and I'm not 100% sold on how it was done, I guess, but it's a short scene. I feel like there's a lot of contextual things outside of the book itself and the story itself that make me feel a little bit not okay with that kind of thing, partly because it felt a little bit to me like it was used to push the story on, I guess, a little bit, like it was used to be the catalyst for something, and I don't know. I obviously feel lots of things about it, and I can't fully express them properly here. Clearly, I thought I would be able to. I was going to do a full review on this book, but I don't even know anymore. But all of that aside, I did actually overall like the book, and I think most people in the book club were not happy with how it ended, but I actually liked how it ended. I thought it made everything feel... I wonder if just talking about how I felt about the ending and why I liked the ending would be a spoiler for it, so I'm not going to go into depth about it, but I really liked the ending. I found out after I read it from somebody else in the group that there's actually a second book, and it sounds interesting, so I think I'll probably at some point check that out. Would I recommend it? I don't really know. I mean, again, overall I liked it. Would I recommend it though? I don't know. So there's that. That was not from my shelves. I had been wanting to read it, but it wasn't from my shelves. Next up, we have Audre Lorde's The Master's Tools Will Not Dismantle the Master's House. This one has been on my TBR for a while, and I kind of got it because it's just short, this tiny little book. I think it's maybe 50 pages, and I got it because I've never read any Audre Lorde, and I really loved this. I thought it was really accessible while also explaining some very complex things, and it felt like it gave me a new take on certain things as well. After I read it, I posted something in my stories on Instagram that I really loved it, and then one of my friends messaged me saying that she would recommend Sister Outsider, I think it is. She said that she would assume that all of the essays in here, and I think there's about 3 of them, or maybe 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So she thought that most of them, if not all, would be in Sister Outsider, and she sent me the contents page of Sister Outsider, and all of them are in there, so I will definitely be picking that book up because I loved every essay in this. Some of them much more than others, but I thought that the whole little collection was really worth my time. Next up, I have a book that I bought last year. It is The Lunar Language by Charlotte Eichler. This is a collection of poetry, and I mean, I don't know if I've ever discussed this before, but I don't really feel like I have a good foothold in poetry at all. I like to try reading poetry every so often just to feel out what my tastes for it are and stuff, and I actually bought this book after an event with Charlotte and Jen Campbell, and they were talking about their work, and each of them read some of their poems. Charlotte read from this book and Jen read from her book that she had out at the time, and I really liked what they had read, so I picked up their books, and I have no idea how it's taken me this long to get to it, but it is filled with lots of nature imagery, lots of imagery of the sea and of forest. I liked this collection, and it was a really quick read because it's so thin. And poetry, I guess, is fast to read, but then I always think poetry isn't fast to read because you have to like sit there with it and really think about what it's actually saying and then think about all the various meanings it could possibly have. So I actually find poetry to be not that quick a read, and maybe that's the point. The next book that I read was an audiobook from my library called The Sympathizer by Viet, Nguyen, and I really loved the book. I liked as well how much you learned. I mean, it's a novel about, well, let me tell you what it's about then. It's about a sleeper agent in Vietnam who ends up in the US, and it touches on loyalties and communism versus capitalism and America's role in Vietnam and other countries' role in Vietnam to some extent, and the representation of other and immigration and just loads of things, all of the things that you could imagine that would be to do with that kind of story. And I, not that long ago, been watching the Ken Burns documentary on the Vietnam War, and I learned, let me tell you, I haven't even finished that series, and I've learned so much, and I feel like there were loads of things that would require me to watch it over again to really get them ingrained in my head that was going on. And I find that whole event really fascinating. And this book, even though it's a novel, there were just so many things that he would say in the book that felt like, I wish I could annotate that, but I didn't because it was an audiobook, obviously. I don't know how much more in depth I can get with this one because it just feels like there's so much that was going on. I feel like this is in line with a lot of other books that I read of this kind, and by that I mean things like, if we're going back really far, well, not really far, but if we're going back far-ish, things like 1984 or Brave New World, and then more recently things like The Rope, where you have a complex government situation and the opportunity for conspiracy and the opportunity for lots of distrust and the infiltration of the system. And then, I don't know if this is a spoiler, I'm gonna say that this is a spoiler and put spoiler somewhere on the screen just in case. I don't feel like it is, but just in case. And then there is also, at the end of these books, tends to be the exposition from the big bad enemy or the guy in charge or an agent of the guy in charge, that kind of thing. And I feel like the way that this book did that was very well done to me. There was the big bad's explanation, but it felt more natural to me than, say, in 1984, where the bad guy just explains what was all going on. I guess what I would equate that to is after Fred from Scooby-Doo pulls the mask off of the bad guy, and then the bad guy says, and I would have gotten away with it too if not for you pesky kids, and then he says, perhaps, I mean, he doesn't usually, they usually explain this, but whatever, it's explained directly to the viewer what the whole plan was and how they did it and everything like that. And then it turns the novel into an essay. I mean, I don't have any problem with that. That's fine to me because I like this kind of genre. But I also feel like it's a bit of a clunky way to do that, and I felt like The Sympathizer did that thing well in a way that didn't feel clunky like those other books did. Even though I don't want to hate on them for that because, again, I didn't have a problem with how they did that. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say about The Sympathizer. The last book that I read in April was Create Dangerously by Albert Camus. I liked it. I'm going to say, first of all, overall I liked it, but for some reason I just found it a little difficult to connect with, and I feel like, for me, and I've only read 3 books by him now. I've read this, I've read The Myth of Sisyphus, and I've read L'Étranger. I say The Myth of Sisyphus in English because I read it in English, and I read L'Étranger in French. I personally got on the best with L'Étranger. I don't know if it was because I was reading it in the original language. I doubt that that's why, but I think it's more that I get on better perhaps with his fiction than his nonfiction. And that's not to say that I don't like his nonfiction. I just feel sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes I feel like his nonfiction is a little bit more convolutedly written than it needs to be, but that could just be me being sassy about it. I don't really know. I felt like I was having to make myself pay attention more than I would normally like. However, there were a lot of things that I liked in this book. This one is, again, another book that I annotated. I haven't annotated all of the books down there, but this one is another one that I annotated. I annotated in pencil, and I wish I'd done it in pen instead, because I think pencil smudges too easily, and that's exactly what's happening with these notes. But who knows if I'll ever even look at them again. I might not. I just find the process of annotating helps me to process what I'm reading a little bit better sometimes. But I do wish that I could have easily searchable annotations. Anyway, that's all beside the point. The first essay in this, which I think is Create Dangerously, yes, I thought would be really good for a lot of uni students to read. Uni art students. I mean, uni any students if you want to read it, whatever. But I feel like it's good for creatives. He talks a lot about what art can do, I guess, and what it can represent and how powerful it can be and what its use is, what its use should be, in his opinion. He mentions a lot of things in the aftermath of the Second World War, so it feels very rooted in that time. There's a lot of talk about fascism. There's a lot of talk... it's not just about creativity. As by the way, there's also an essay on intelligence and an essay on freedom. Another thing that was interesting is that the last essay, Bread and Freedom, which is about the meaning of liberty and equality and all of those things, ties in so well with The Sympathizer. Just saying, if you want to read them together, do so. Actually, I would recommend reading The Sympathizer and watching that Ken Burns documentary, but if you wanted to read something along with The Sympathizer instead, then last essay in this, Bread and Freedom. Yeah, I think I would recommend it to anyone in the humanities, particularly students in year one, students in freshmen, is that what they're called in the US? I don't know. But anyway, people who just start uni, I would recommend that one too. And that's all the books that I've read in April, and I feel pretty good about that. What is the count so far? I'm going to put the count here for books that I read from my TBR list. I think it's 5 maybe. I'm not doing too bad, so I'm pretty enthused by that. I'm going to maybe pick out a longer book from my TBR to tackle, and you might not see a tally pop back up until maybe 2 months from now or something. There's no guarantee that I'll actually finish something else from my TBR if it's a little bit longer this month, but we'll see. There's lots of things going on at the minute that I think would be cool to mention, but this is already 45 minutes long, and then I have to go through that and edit that and take out all the mistakes and take out all the stupid things that I've said and reduce that hopefully to 10 minutes or less. So I'm gonna cut this short. So I'm going to cut this off here and just say thank you for watching, and I'll see you again next time. Bye. Oh, this is getting so long. It's going to be hell to edit.